The signing of the London Naval Treaty on the 22nd of April 1930 would place limitations on the size of destroyer fleets and individual destroyer units. For Japan in specific, they could not exceed 105,500 tons of destroyers, and each unit could not exceed 1,850 tons. This would ensure that Japan could not repeat design F-43 or immediately improve upon it, which was the Fubuki class. Instead, they would have to create a new design of a smaller, less powerful destroyer fleet, and this would result in designs F-45A, the Hatsuharus, and F-45D, the Shiratsurus. The new destroyer design was initially satisfactory. That was until the 12th of March 1934, when the Tomozuru incident occurred, when the torpedo boat Tomozuru capsized in a storm as a result of instability and poor construction techniques. Japanese warship design and construction would temporarily stall, while solutions were found to the issues that had become apparent when the Tomozuru capsized. As a result, a lot of the budget that was approved in 1930 for warship construction was now being used to reconstruct already existing ships to make them stable and also increase the strength of their structures. In order to continue with new construction, the Japanese Navy would have to submit the 1934 reinforcement program to replenish the budget that had been depleted in the reconstruction of older ships. The approved budget for this program would total 431,700 yen, and the Japanese Navy was not intent on wasting it, even if that meant violating treaties in warship design and construction. The Naval General Staff had recognized that improving upon the Shiratsuru class was no longer an option, and they had looked back to the Fubuki class, which they had wanted to improve upon prior to the London Naval Treaty being signed. Since the Japanese were going to allow their signature on all foreign treaties to expire in 1936 anyway, they had decided that for the 1934 construction program, they would create an improvement of the Fubuki. The design requirements set forth by the Naval General Staff were rather basic. The destroyers had to have increased strength and stability compared to preceding classes. They had to have a speed of no less than 34 knots. They had to have improved operational range, and their main armament had to be made up of no less than 6 12.7 centimeter Type 3 guns with a torpedo armament of no less than 8 torpedo tubes with 1 reload per tube. Design F-48 was submitted and accepted for construction in 1934. The characteristics are as follows. The vessel would have a standard displacement of 1,961 tons and a full load displacement of 2,370 tons. Its overall length would be 118.3 meters, it would have a beam of 10.3 meters, and a draft of 3.7 meters. The propulsion system would be made up of 3 boilers producing 50,000 shaft horsepower, providing steam to 2 geared turbines, which turn 2 screws. This would provide the ships with a maximum speed of 35 knots, which was 1 knot faster than anticipated, and it would provide an operational range of 5,000 nautical miles at 18 knots. The ship's main armament would be made up of 6 12.7 centimeter 50 caliber Type 3 naval guns in 3 dual turrets, 1 forward and 2 superfiring aft. The anti-aircraft complement would be 2 dual Type 96 anti-aircraft guns, which was the first destroyer to receive these weapons upon completion, and they would have 2 quadruple 61 centimeter torpedo tubes on the center line of the ship with 1 reload per tube, and to round off the armament, they would be provided with 36 depth charges for anti-submarine warfare. The first ship of the class would be laid down at the Sasebo Naval Yard on the 7th of September 1935, and it would be completed on the 31st of August 1937, being named Asashio. It would pass its name down to a class of 10 destroyers. The Asashio class would prove satisfactory overall, but there were a handful of minor defects that Japanese designers would note as the first units of the class would enter service, and so for the destroyers of the 1937 program, a few design alterations were required. First, the torpedoes to reload the forward launcher aboard Asashio were placed on either side of the second funnel in highly exposed positions. For the new class of destroyers, it was recommended to move these forward of the torpedo launcher on either side of the forward funnel and in lower, less exposed positions. The relocation of these torpedoes would have 2 goals in mind. It was hoped that the safety of the torpedoes would be improved when the destroyers were under shelling conditions, and it was also hoped that it would improve stability. Second, to improve the stability of the new class, it was recommended that the beam be increased, but in order to not lose speed, a slight increase in propulsion performance was also requested. Finally, the reaction time of the Asashio to the turn of its rudder was not satisfactory. As a result, the new class would have to have an enlarged, redesigned rudder and also a slightly redesigned stern. Design F-49 was submitted and accepted for construction in 1937. The characteristics are as follows. The ships would have a standard displacement of 2,033 tons and a full load displacement of around 2,300 tons. They would have an overall length of 118.5 meters, a beam of 10.8 meters, and a draft of 3.8 meters. Overall, the propulsion system would remain identical to that of the Asashio, with the exception being that the boilers would now produce 52,000 shaft horsepower, which allowed these slightly larger vessels to retain the same 35 knot speed. The armament loadout would also be identical to that of the preceding Asashios. The first ship of this class would be laid down at the Tomozuru Navy Yard on the 3rd of September 1937 and would be completed on the 6th of November 1939, being named Kagero. It would pass its name down to a class of 19 ships. The Kagero class would effectively solve all issues that had surfaced in the Asashio class, but there was still one problem that the Japanese felt they could refine further. This was the stability and air resistance on the ship. As a result, it was decided that for the 1939 building program, a new class of ship with a redesigned superstructure would be necessary. Design F-50 was submitted and accepted for construction in 1939, and overall, it was identical to that of the Kagero, with 3 major exceptions. The bow structure had been redesigned for better aero and hydrodynamics, the superstructure had been redesigned for lighter construction and better aerodynamics, and the stern had been slightly lengthened, giving the ships an overall length of 119 meters, and as a result of these changes, the displacement would slightly rise to 2,077 tons standard. The propulsion system, speed, and armament would all remain unchanged. The first ship would be laid down at the Tomozuru Navy Yard on the 12th of June 1940, and it would be completed on the 5th of December 1941, being named Yugumo. Yugumo, like Kagero, would pass its name down to a class of 19 vessels. Between these 3 classes of ships, the Japanese would produce 48 destroyers, and in a practical sense, their characteristics were identical, meaning that this was a very uniform backbone to the Japanese Navy during the Second World War. The Japanese Navy was highly satisfied with these 3 classes of ships, and they also understood that the designs compared favorably with foreign contemporaries that were designed and constructed around the same time. With that said, it did not make them invincible in the upcoming war, as, out of the 48 ships between these 3 classes the Japanese would complete, only one, the Yukikaze from the Kagero class, would manage to survive the Second World War. All of the others were sunk. With that having been said, I have nothing more I wish to add on to this subject for today. So, if you have learned something new in this video, why not leave a like and a comment down below, and have a wonderful day.